Welcome, everyone. We'll be starting shortly.
So I'm going to go ahead.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion of People Strategy Forum and our leading experts in the recovery phase of COVID-19, as well as some additional discussion about the current environment of national unrest. Hello, my name is Shar Miller. I am a talent management consultant and a people strategist with CompTeam, and I'm also a owner of a company of Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, and I also do career coaching called HR with a Heart. So I'm pleased to be sponsoring today the Employee People Forum here with Lisa Jackson, who's a cultural strategist with Corporate Culture Pros, as well as Sam Reeve, who's the CEO of CompTeam. And we are very happy to have you join us today. So before I get into our discussion today with our speakers, I just want to talk about some logistics. We are on a live session here, and we do ask that you share this session. It will be recorded on compteam.net. And on compteam.net on the website, you'll find a recording of our former people strategy discussions and HR forums. And we'd love to hear from you today during the conversation through Q&A and chat. So please participate below, and we'll be sure to discuss your questions during the forum today, as well as if we don't get an opportunity to discuss your topic, we'll be sure to follow up with each of you. And lastly, I do encourage each of you to share this session, again, from compteam.net. This information will be recorded, and you'll also be invited to our next session next week, Wednesday, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So today we have some exciting topics to talk about. One, we are going, first of all, I'd like to introduce Todd Bauerle, who is going to discuss the new economy and the opportunity of infinite mindset. And Todd is a owner and executive coach of Bauerle Consulting. And then also we will have Lisa Jackson discuss the succession planning simplified and the future of your talent journey. So as you notice, we'll have several of us participating and going through this discussion, and you're welcome to join us throughout the conversation as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lisa Jackson, Sam Reeves, and also I think we have Brian O'Neill that's going to join us with these discussions today as well. So Lisa?
Thank you, Shar. It's good to see all of you this morning here, and I hope that you're all doing well. I think it's fair to say that there's been no time in history than now that we need leadership in our country and in our businesses. And so I want to talk about that bigger picture of succession planning in the context of how important it is to develop a certain type of leader in your organization, and keeping it a bit simple because sometimes this whole topic can be so overwhelming to people. So let's start with just a definition of succession planning, which should be, and this is pretty basic definition of what we're wanting to accomplish with succession planning, is compiling the competencies, the skills, and the goals of each employee, and then comparing those to the needs of current and future roles in the business. And that really is about tracking employee progress to fill those roles. HBR recently revealed that less than 50%, and Harvard Business Review, if those of you who are not used to the acronyms, revealed that less than 50% of companies are doing succession planning for most important roles. And it really is an opportunity cost issue that if someone leaves the organization who's critical and there isn't some plan in place already to fill those shoes, it can be devastating to the business, especially if they're in a mission critical role. But there's also, even in larger organizations, when they've done it at the C-suite but not down into the organization, then it ends up costing at that mid-level management level, where people just don't see the opportunity to grow being as formalized. So the costs are big of not having it, and what we want to do today is really tee up a discussion about how to create this process in a way that is is not just about, is this person competent to fulfill the role, but are they credible to fill the role, and how we're going to measure, along those two kind of continuums.
Right.
Every employee should be thinking about that. Yeah, Sam.
Yeah. So one thing that, I mean, I know we were talking about this yesterday, Lisa. I mean, it's just that shocking statistic that HBR put out. Less than 50% of companies are actually doing this, and that's the big piece there, is that with all the risk that is going on in the marketplace right now, companies to avoid any further type of economic impact need to remove some of that risk out of the equation. And the succession planning, not just for your leadership, but for those hot roles and skills that you have across the company, is critical to ensure that those people are retained, and that you're developing people for those next steps so that they feel like there's a future for them in the company. So critical thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's move to the next slide. So I want to talk about some context here. What you're seeing is comp team's talent motivation analysis alignment model. So that's a big set of words, but it's really about just understanding the intersection between what the organization's roles need to look like in order to achieve the work and the projects that drive the strategy, and that is really about where we're defining competencies that are needed for the organization, and the intersection of the individual's motivation and the things that the individuals really thrive in, and that they feel are meaningful and engaging work for them. And the intersection of that is behavior, and behavior is the key to alignment. So we want to talk in behavioral terms with succession, and not just be, oh, that guy or gal looks like a great leader and has great potential to be a leader, but like really looking at where that behavioral alignment is and formulating it. Not only provides a sense of fairness, but it also provides, I think, a sense of, so perceived fairness, but it also provides a sense of that people know where they stand and where they're being groomed for in the organization. Does that make sense, Sam? Anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, the big thing here is what we're trying to do is evolve the past thinking around this. When companies were thinking about talent management or jobs, or how they can do succession planning, they have they almost have the traditional org structure in mind. The Lego blocks that we're putting in place that say, okay, this is this job, and this job goes into that job, and so forth here. What we're trying to show here is that there's when we think about roles in the organization, it should be more about what that role contributes as far as their competencies that are required and the skills that are required for that role, and so forth. So what we're trying to show here is that there's one side where we're thinking about what are the types of activities that are going to drive towards that strategic alignment, or those objectives that we're trying to accomplish. And then what is our talent pool that we have, and and understanding their unique behaviors, drives, and talents, and so forth, and finding the right match where we're bringing those together. That's where we're aligning those roles and those talents and drives in the correct behaviors to really move forward with success. And so it's a different way of looking at talent. It's not just the who is in the career of X, Y, and Z. It's who really has the skills to do a variety of different things. Because our modern workplace, especially in knowledge workers, we're thinking about having people on a variety of different projects, cross-functional, that have different skill sets, and it's not really defined in a singular job.
Well, especially, Sam, as so many companies are going through transformational change and business redesign right now, but even prior to COVID, you're seeing a lot of transformation that's happening, and the roles are, I think, in this process has not necessarily evolved. And, so I think that's one of the most important things to consider, is that as you transform your business around these more fluid, dynamic ways of operating and setting strategy, even, that the whole way in which you also grow leaders has to be transformed.
Right. Mm-hmm. So Brian, have you seen some examples of how the businesses are being transformed right now? And
You know, what's interesting to me is that I think many businesses are being transformed because they're being forced to be,
yeah,
not necessarily because they are making conscious decisions to make the transformation, but
Right.
there's two big things. There's been kind of a wave that's going at about 1 mile an hour, and it's a bunch of water, and it's moving slowly and seeping into businesses, and it's been going on for 10 years now, and that is the unmistakable fact that the baby boomers are retiring, and the entire workforce, the baby boomers, who for 40 years have been the bulge in the population, have been the folks who have first in their 20s and 30s been the go-getters and really created a lot of the big companies that we know of and are familiar today. That bulge is now reaching retirement age, and thousands of baby boomers every day are dropping out of the workforce. And this is pre-COVID. This is a phenomenon for which, because it has been happening slowly, many businesses have kind of said, yeah, we can worry about that later. They treat it in terms of it's on the horizon, but it's not really hitting us just yet. Well, that's all fine and good, but now we have the more critical tidal wave that is now setting over everybody with the idea of the worldwide pandemic, and how it has completely changed some of the ways that a lot of businesses in huge numbers of sectors are able to actually run the business, actually able to tactically handle the business, including things like cash flow and whether or not they're going to have their doors open. And so these two things together are combining to say to many businesses, oh my gosh, I guess it's time for us to sit back and really understand, where do we want to be? We can no longer operate on a next quarter basis on just what we're going to do next quarter. We really have to start thinking about, where will our business be in terms of long-term viability? What's going to happen in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? And that's where an alignment model like this can really help to begin to realize that people in your workforce, as they're entering the workforce, really want work that helps contribute to an overall long-term sense of where the business is going. They want to know that they're making a difference. And as you move into the more strategic levels of the organization, you've got to have more and more focus onto, is what we're doing really aligned with our values? Are our behaviors really what we want to have? Is this what we really want to stand for? Is this what our business is all about? And I think successful businesses in the next decade are going to move to that model. And unsuccessful businesses are going to be swamped either by, the individual tactics of tsunamis like COVID, or by the long-term seepage of the fact that the workforce is completely changing. And what we knew about the workforce even 5 years ago is now different.
Yeah, that's very true. And just to add one quick point on that before we move to the next piece, Brian, that I think that you point to the baby boomer exodus, the millennial incoming has really different motivations for work.
Great.
And that is that whole meaning piece, and that whole, I want to be able to have career growth. I think those might be cited as two of the top 3 motives for this generation, who is planning to, most people say probably be somewhere between 70 and 80% of the workforce within 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So very, very important to rethink this alignment, through the lens of your customer, which is your talent in this case. So let's move along to the next piece, Sam. So I want to talk just a couple pieces about, if we haven't already addressed it, about why it's so important, the retention. I use this REV idea, acronym to simplify the reasons why. If you're having to explain this to a leader, it's about retention, it's about employee experience, and almost every leader today understands those two things are very, very important. And then it really is the key to vitality and growth of the business, because the leadership in any team or division, department, or organizational level has the sort of the keys to the vitality and growth in terms of unlocking that door, whereas all of your talent and your employees in the organization are the ones that are going to implement that, and they're going to walk that journey. So very, very important that there's a simple way to help your leaders understand the importance of doing this. And I think what stops that from happening in the clients where I've worked, they all kind of go, oh yeah, we've got this, or we threw it over the fence to HR. And it's not that HR doesn't have a critical role in this, but it becomes really important for HR to help leaders understand this is their process, and that it isn't just a check the box piece or a process that HR should own and put into place. You're going to help define the process, put some very concreteness behind it. And a lot of the barriers to where leaders come from with owning this has to do with the complexity of it, the traditional 9-box model. We're going to offer you a couple different ways to think about that today. The future fog is that we don't, right now especially, we do not know what the future holds. So how can we make false promises to employees to promote them? And I think that sort of misses the point and gets really obscured when you're thinking about the overarching bit that Brian just spoke to, which is, who does your organization need to become, especially if you're a larger or mid-sized organization over the next 3 to 5 years, and what kind of leadership behaviors and leadership competencies do we need? It's not so much that you're putting a star on people's head to say you're next in line, but really sort of looking at it from a broader picture. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, it does. I like that. I mean, it's important to point out the future fog. And we were talking about succession. There's no guarantees for anything in the future, but and I think that the important piece is to make sure that we communicate that. I mean, everybody wants certainty, but we all know that there's a lot of volatility in what's going on, and we're all finding our way forward. And communicating that and being transparent with your employees and those people that you trust the most it's a way to build that relationship. So that's important.
I think just as somebody was putting into the chat, I just saw it pop up about the people don't resist change. I think it was Todd that said people don't resist change, they resist being changed. And so much of what I want to add, just a small point, that I believe that succession planning should actually involve some of the people on the front lines of the business, right? So rather, it's a little bit non-traditional to think about it that way, but not just having your senior leaders sitting in a room with a wall board that everybody knows is happening, but they're being talked about, and they don't have any engagement or involvement in how those decisions are made. So more that you can get fingerprints on the process with a group of people that have input, the more that you're going to have, the less you'll have of that resistance to change.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move forward. So this is something that, again, just builds the business case for leadership development, period, and the succession planning being one arm of that. That when people have supervisor support, 88% of them say that their employer values training, 43% say they will stay because of development opportunities, and 73% say that they will participate in development. So those aren't surprising statistics to me. What surprised me was when your supervisor is not supportive, whatever that looks like and whatever size company you're in, those statistics drop dramatically. That people don't necessarily even want to participate in development because they feel like they're not allowed to, there's no permission to. And I see that all the time in the organizations I work in. We got this really cool management development program, but the boss says, I can't let them go. They need to be here at work. I don't have time to let them go participate in these programs. And then you see what happens. So just an overarching need for us to look at leadership development is part of the job of the organization, rather than seeing it as something that's just a nice to have.
Right. Yeah, it does tell you how, I mean, these statistics are clear to show you how important the role of the manager is in having that effective relationship. And I've heard several times where managers will say, well, I can't afford him to go out. I can't afford her to go get this training. And this is like shooting yourself in the foot. You know, if you want to develop and you want to delegate and you want to have a more smooth running organization, this is something that is required in an organization.
Yeah, I mean, just to that, just when you look at just this statistic alone, 7% say they will stay because of development opportunities. Flip that around. 93% of people, if your direct supervisor is not supportive of their development, are got their resume ready.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's a problem.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Brian?
Well, I was trying to type in the chat, but I'll go ahead and say it verbally. To me, this is the there have been variations on the classic quote, right, where the CFO says, "What if we give these people all this growth and development and then they leave?" And then either the HR person or hopefully an enlightened CEO says right back, "What if we don't give these people growth and development and then they stay?"
Yeah.
The idea is that I think one of the great enlightenments of true servant leadership, and this goes even back to Simon Sinek's latest book, The Infinite Game, and understanding looking at your business as more of a very long-term enterprise that goes on long after you've exited the planet. One of the core values of that is that we grow and develop people knowing that in some cases we are growing and developing them for them to go off and leave and another company and excel there, because there isn't just one company on the planet. And especially these days, when you get into Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, folks understand that the rules of the game these days are that, I may spend 3 years in one company and then go hone my skills in another company for 3 or 4 years and then jump to yet another company to do something. And that's how I grow and develop. And true enlightened companies understand this. And number one, realize that the investment they make in growth and development is not just for the person involved, but it's for the reputation and the culture and the vision of the company. And secondly, boomerangs are much more common these days and should be embraced instead of, "Oh yeah, you left our company, so we're never going to talk to you anymore. We're never going to deal with your pox on your house," and off you go, which is why companies like Disney have such robust alumni organizations.
I'm just going to say that, the alumni network, right?
Right. And that is a part of the whole thing too. That's not just succession planning within the silo of your own organization. That's understanding that we're all looking to grow and develop. And if we can give those gifts to people, it will come back and pay dividends later on down the line.
Yeah, I have one of my clients is just witnessed that situation. They develop really close in relationships with their employees, and there's a lot of trust. And sometimes there is a person that wants to leave and go to get other experience or a particular title or a promotional opportunity, but that they consider that person that's leaving part of their talent pool, and they nurture that relationship even when that person is outside of their organization, for hope that they'll come back. And often they do. And as we all know, when we go into a new environment, we have to rebuild our relationships with those individuals and those team members. And a lot of times you will, if you've had a good experience at your previous employer, you'll want to go back there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well said. So let's I'm just going to roll through this a little bit quickly, because I want to get to the meat of the discussion on really what we want to offer you in terms of what to do with the succession planning. In the past, it really did have this stigma of only large companies are doing it. And then even if they were doing it, it wasn't really thought of as a living, breathing kind of process, where it's still, I see this a lot in organizations, that it's ignored in the day-to-day versus being a compass by which we navigate our leadership programs and our leadership process and our promotions process. And all of those are linked together, not only with the results that the person is getting, but with their living of the core values of the business and the culture of the business. And I think that complex 9-box model feels unrelatable. I have struggled with it in my own career to just really put meat on the bones, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So tomorrow's succession planning, number one, I believe that we have to incorporate diversity into really looking through that lens of, no more is there a time when we can relate to the fact that there are talented, wonderful people who are often overlooked for promotions, and we need to help minorities, whether it's women, whether it's people of color, whatever the case, whether it's people who are handicapped, thrive, grow, and lead, because those people often have more desire than someone who feels that they have been groomed since college to ascend to the C-level position. They need to be fluid. So it's that piece that Sam talked about earlier with the talent management, the talent motivation hourglass, about constantly grooming and developing people to be formal leaders and informal leaders in the organization. There's a lot of opportunity for people to lead in places that maybe aren't as traditional corporate ladder. Multi-track, so I talk about a lot with my clients about the leadership track, which is more of the sort of the ladder kind of piece, whereas the expert path, and this is something Facebook has been experimenting with, that we don't think you are actually cut out for leading people. We've known that, you know, together between us. I'm sort of mirroring the boss employee conversation. We've known that together, but we're going to try you in a management role. The person doesn't succeed in a management role. What's their option to grow? What's their option to grow their income, to grow their career? So they have this expert path, which is really about developing greater and greater subject matter expertise, where they might be on, you know, certain types of, I'm losing the word, or you might have them on certain teams or leading certain competency development areas for the business, or leading a certain initiative around innovation, those kind of things where they're not in a formal succession or a formal chain of reporting, but they have expertise to bring that they can grow their career that way. So I really love that idea of a couple of different tracks there. And the lily pad piece versus the ladder is really builds on that, the flexibility of people flowing in and out based on their life circumstances, which you just spoke to, Sam. Any further comments? I know we're going to be kind of pushing on the time frame, so I want to just get us to the meat of the subject here. So I keep it simple, and I think that's one of the most important evolutionary pieces we need around succession planning, is finding a way to keep it simple. But it's not fair. It's not really credible to say it's going to be simple, but we need to simplify the process. And so this is a 4-grid model. I think there are lots of different ways of thinking about it. I think that we were having a conversation a little bit before everybody came on about how people don't want to be in a box. And I think that's one thing. Maybe this should be a circle, you know, and just change the shape a little bit. But I do want to just point out a couple dynamics around this particular way of thinking about it. The vertical axis is the track record. So that's the measurable part. And the results obviously are one piece that is most easy for most organizations to measure. Did you meet your KPIs? Do you consistently perform the responsibilities and the outcomes that we've asked you to perform? The likability factor is something that we were kind of going back and forth a little bit among us as panelists about where that should live, whether that should literally be replacing the potential, which is the classic kind of succession planning dynamic, right? Do you get results? And then what's your potential? And it's very difficult to limit potential, to assess potential. Brian, I want to just have you speak about this one for a minute, because I thought some of the comments that you made before we started were really relevant here.
Sure. I think it's been one of the great evils of 9box. As a matter of fact, 9box is you know, has been kind of dissed around now for a good 15, 20 years, to the point that, you know, one of the companies that was famous for the 9box, GE, no longer uses it.
Yeah.
They have abandoned the 9box. And one of the big reasons around it is this concept of how do you measure people's potential? And what does that even mean in an environment where always it's a pyramid? There's only one CEO in a company. There are many frontline leaders. There are fewer mid-level leaders. There are even fewer vice presidents, and there's one CEO. Why would you set up a system where everybody's racing to become CEO, where everybody is attempting to get that one magical spot, or those 4 or 5 magical VP spots sitting at the top, where strengths, you know, more of a strengths-based format says, similar to what Facebook is doing, you know what, we need a lot of good people who are individual contributors, professionals who can grow and develop in those ways to give us that kind of expertise. And so I think that's one good way to think about this. The second thing is that, you know, we've got to find a better way to more objectively define what potential means. Potential for what? What exactly is that? What are the rules? How do we give those guidelines to executives? Because the problem is, if you don't give senior leaders and executives good guidance and exactly what to use more objectively on what potential means, they tend to fall back on just things like, oh, that person reminds me of me 20 years ago. And, you know, I was a go-getter because look at me, I'm a senior leader today. So that person looks a lot like me, and I can't really define it, and I can't really tell you exactly what it is. And unfortunately, if I really dig deep and go in there, it's probably going to have a lot of bias features in it. Like he's the same social class as me, and he grew up in my area, and he went to my school, he went to my college, and then you get into things like, and he's the same gender, and he's the same color, and wow, that's why we have these problems right now of ensuring that folks who don't have those inherent advantages are getting a fair shake. And that's why I think we really need to look at this whole concept of what is potential and what are we really trying to do here in order to make sure we have a good workforce to carry on the business in the future.
Brian, somebody just, Todd just wrote up in the chat something about that's also, that bias is also blind defaults as well.
Absolutely.
So, you know, if I've got my own blind spots, I'm probably, and this person's like me, I'm probably going to be ignoring their faults as well. So that really just flies in the face of the whole diversity piece. And so one piece I want to just, and Sam, I want to, you know, just see if you had something to weigh in on this particular bit. But one thing I want to point out about this idea of the 4-box, or in some way keeping it simplified, is that if the person has a great track record, but they have poor likability. So let's just kind of narrow it to that scenario. And that happens a lot. I talk about the superstar salesperson who's kicking it out of the park, but leaving the trail of dead bodies behind them, right? They're not meeting the core values of the business. That looks more like a coaching and development scenario. Is this person's coachable? Do they want to be coached? Do they want to grow? Versus somebody who lives the core values, who really demonstrates that likability, but they just can't quite get the engine running in terms of the business results. Maybe that's a training or mentoring solution. So not being quite so, well, they've got this, but not that, right? And oftentimes just ignoring the fact that the superstar on the results track is really undermining your culture in your organization.
You're right. It's a pull between competency and behavior.
Yeah.
And you know, the thing that we need to remember is that it's true. A person with the right competencies can really make a huge difference in a business. They can pull a lot of weight there. But a person that has the wrong behaviors can be a cancer and destroy a lot of momentum that the business might have, and also harm your ability to bring on future talent and grow for the long term. So then you have to ask yourself, okay, if we're going to put up with this poor behavior, how long are we going to do that for? And have a once again, a succession plan of how you're going to move that person out if that person is not developing as you need, and how you're going to replace those skill sets to keep momentum in the future.
Yeah, I think this is a bigger conversation than we have time for with this time, but this piece, I have seen so many situations where a succession planning or a leadership development process completely loses credibility in the front lines of the business because you've got 2 or 3 toxic leaders that nobody will deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a really, really important point. So let's just get into a few things that we are recommending you can do. So I think it's really important, as we talked about earlier, to identify a succession planning team that includes all levels of the organization initially. And that what that team is doing is identifying, I think it's the second bullet, is behaviors. Crucial capabilities, first of all, for strategic growth. So where are we going? Imagine that we might want to go to kind of unfog the future a little bit, right? I know it's really hard in an arena like today to do that with accuracy, but then creating, and this is something that I've helped my clients do, creating leadership personas rather than job descriptions at these different levels, creating leadership personas of the kind of person and leader that we're looking for at each of these different levels. It can be a very powerful exercise for, again, for people at all levels to go through and start really agreeing upon what we want from the people who are leading us to those strategic capabilities. And then it's a really important point, and Sam, we were talking about this yesterday, to identify those mission critical leadership roles versus places where we're developing people to kind of take that next step, and there's a little more risk that is involved with those mission critical leadership roles, and certainly leaving those blank is a huge risk to the business.
Absolutely. I mean, there's, and I think that really hones in this next point that Lisa, is that it's really important to think about those behaviors and those competencies that are required, not just the emotions that a person takes to fulfill a role. I mean, especially as you get higher up in the organization, I mean, that those behaviors are critical.
Anything to add, Brian?
No, it always comes back to what some people like to call the soft skills, and they're the hardest skills of all.
Right. Yes.
Basic communication skills, coaching skills. How do you interact with others? What does that look like? And that is where the persona can help versus just job role, which tends to be more job description, tends to be more the very specific tactical things you actually do in a particular role.
Yeah,
And
I just want to
go ahead, Sam.
I just wanted to point out this comment that Todd put in the chat. What you are is so much more important than what you do, and that's, I think that is very true. It's very important. Even if a lot of times we've had even companies that don't have or don't have the right processes in place, but if they have a strong leader and they have strong employees with the right behaviors, they're going to thrive.
Yeah, and I think, just one more point about the personas, which I think that that starts to bring this concept to life. And that I have helped work with the organization on defining these personas where they can feel the leader that they want, and that actually kind of almost magically helps the right person emerge. And then it becomes less of a check the box process and much more of a, as we think about the best leaders that we've ever worked for, how does that map onto the person that we're looking for in this role? What does an ideal leader in our organization look like? So these are questions that I've used. There's a few of them. They're not the whole list. Number 2 is, what is the role of leadership in this position now and in the future? What skills do these leaders need in an increasingly virtual workplace is a newer question that I think is incredibly relevant for the times that we're living in. And there are a lot of companies testing the waters on that as we speak. And how do we create stronger alignment among our leadership at every level? So that's both from the vertical level, but also cross-functionally and horizontally. Very, very important that the personas have some kind of glue that kind of hangs them together across the business. So those are a few ideas for those of you who are wondering about how to make this concrete. Anything that you guys want to add to that bit, or generally from the chat that we want to bring up as we close out this portion of our forum?
Yeah, I think you've covered this quite well. I mean, there's just so many things that we need to think about when we're in developing people. But what I would have to say is really understanding your talent pool and what they want to do and what their passions are, what their innate talents are, is critical to ensure that you're driving those future objectives in your business. I mean, the best way to utilize those passions and talents is critical. Any thoughts there, Brian, and that you would like to add?
Well, and I know that this is an even deeper obstacle for folks, or a higher obstacle in this day and age, because previously, in decades before, we've always had a good set of role models. We've had good examples of ideal leaders. We can kind of, in a lot of ways just emulate what we are seeing in terms of great leadership, and that begets other great leadership. It's much tougher today. There are very few examples out there in the world of what I would consider to be great leaders, servant leaders, folks who really embrace the role of what leadership is like for vision and mission, aligning values, being able to engage employees and so on. It's tough, but we've got to find those folks, and we've got to make sure that we're following those. And even if we can't find them, it doesn't change the idea of the definitions of what ideal leaders are all about. That information is out there and available. So don't just copycat or emulate somebody that's in a high position just because they happen to have gotten there. Make sure that if you're looking at these personas and you're asking these questions, make sure you truly get the behaviors and competencies of an ideal leader that makes sense for your company.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, the cultural model for what's an ideal leader has changed significantly over the past several years. It used to be, okay, dress for success and emulate what you're seeing above. But what we're finding is that it's more powerful to have the messages come to work as you are, of who you are, and have that sense of freedom and innovate on it creates more innovation in relationship building. So it's quite a different world than it was 10, 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Great discussion.
Right, well, go ahead, Lisa.
Are you going to speak to this?
Well, I'm just going to say real quick, I mean, one of the big pieces of what we were talking about, understanding competencies and the type of workforce you have. This tool that we've offered as a complimentary offer towards our listeners is a great way to understand those unique talents and competencies of your workforce and also your candidates. And so if you'd like to give it a try, just go ahead and shoot me an email, and then I'll send you what an assessment looks like.
It was eye-opening for me. I've done this assessment and been like, oh, that whole package of who Lisa Jackson is for real, shows up in the world just like, and it's very powerful to see that in action.
That's awesome. Well, I just want to thank you all. That was very enlightening conversation. I too have stood in the boardroom discussing the 9-box, and very aware that some leaders were not achieving operational outcomes, but were very popularized, I guess you could say, a favorite. So anyway, I think having a new model today is really more important than ever. So now transitioning, I'm just so happy to have Todd here. Hi, Todd.
Hi.
Todd Bauerle. We are going to discuss the new economy and opportunity and infinite mindset. And I am so thrilled to have you on board with us, Todd. I also am a career coach. So you and I have similar passions about transforming our careers, particularly during these times. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Todd.
Hi, thanks everybody. Appreciate you being here. I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I think it's right on point with what we're talking about. I think we are all aware of the current state of not just the economy, right, but society as well. So I know we got a ton of people here that are watching. I thrive on interaction and getting feedback from you guys. And so just to level the playing field and realize that we're all the same. If you could type a 1 in the chat, if right now there's a little anxiety either about your career, about your business, about your industry, go ahead and throw that in there, right? So that we can see that we're all, Brian's extremely anxious with a million ones in there, right? So we're all in that same mind space right now. And it's important to acknowledge that. But this is likely the result of how you've been thinking by default, by your default programming, right? Things are crazy, but this is what we're doing, okay? And this is how all of us, the masses, everybody is programmed to react to anything that's going on, whether it's COVID or all the other crazy unrest. We have some result that happens. Let's say, everyone's in lockdown and quarantine, right? Or your businesses are closed down, and you're going to see that impact your sales. We have a tendency to look at those results and we think equal to those results. Oh no, what's going to happen? How are we going to get out of this? And we immediately get emotionally involved in that thinking. This is a typical behavioral model, right? You have something that happens, a stimulus, you have an immediate thought and an immediate feeling. right? So you think the thought, business is going down, you feel anxious, how are we going to keep the doors open, right? And that emotion is what we act with. And so in this model, we're looking at how all of our thoughts, all of our feelings, all of our action is aligned with that result. And this just ends up feeding more of the same. And it leads to this.
Can I interrupt
Yeah,
you? I'm
please.
sorry. Here, I just have to say this. So right now, a lot of employers are going through this process of our companies are changing, our business planning is changing. And so not only is this happening to the executive level of thinking about the results, the thinking, the feeling, the acting, all of that is happening at the senior level, but would you not think that every employee is feeling the same way?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, what's funny, Shar, is we actually live in a world where being vulnerable is a liability rather than an asset, right? And so we're not having open communication about this, from executive leadership all the way down to frontline workers.
Right.
And that's, I think, the point. I think everybody's feeling like this right now, whether they're
Mm-hmm.
saying it or not, right? So, I mean, you guys have felt this way. Have you guys had this in your mind, right?
Yeah, particularly at 3 in the morning when I wake up, all of this is going all over my head.
Yeah, well, and we can't create anything when this is what's in our mind. And I have this up there, this question, where is your mindset? Because our mindset is like a thermostat, right? Wherever it's set, that's the results that we end up getting. Absolutely, Terry. So the reptile brain takes over, right? And this is where we react and we don't respond. I want to describe how this affects us on a level, on our cognitive function and all of that, and help give you guys a picture of what your mind looks like. So most of us, if I were to ask you what your mind looks like, what would you say? If you've got a comment, go ahead and type it in the chat. So I hear this a lot, like flashing colors. Is it my brain? I have no idea. My mind's a disaster, right? Order is a big webby network. Order is heaven's first law. I mean, it really is. Everything needs to be in order. We want our companies, our lives, our minds to be in order, and we can't do that without a picture. So here's a picture of your mind. The big circle on top is your scrambled eggs. The big circle on top is your mind. The little circle is your body. Now, why is that the case? Because mind is the master. The body is the servant. The body will do whatever the mind says. Now, there is a whole lot of different aspects to our brain, our mind, and how we function. And I just really want to focus on two of them. So I want to divide this into two, and I'm going to put our conscious mind in the top. This is our self-talk. You're paying attention to this webinar. Are you putting in comments and being engaged with your conscious mind? And then you have your subconscious mind. This is your feeling mind. The language of the subconscious mind is emotion, okay? And we have this confusion and anxiety in our system for really one reason: ignorance. And I don't want to say that in a way that labels anybody, but ignorance is a lack of knowledge. We just don't know what we don't know. And in fact, going to the whole succession planning process, I'm reminded of a development meeting I had with a supervisor who says, well, what do you want to learn over the next year? And I said, I don't know what I don't know. Isn't that your job as a supervisor to help me? That's such a hard gap to overcome of ignorance. But here's how it looks like when we run it through this map and model of the mind. We've got worry and doubt, or negative cyclical thinking in our conscious mind. It plays like a darn record over and over. This is maybe why you're up at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, and I would say ignorance, you know, obviously, like in my own company, I'll just bring up my own operational example. You know, the malls are shut down. I own a genetic testing company, and they keep changing the dates for the malls to open up. And that is basically our business, you know, that's our business of face-to-face contact. So the worry and doubt, you have to think about, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? Because we have, you know, a good number of employees reporting to us.
And Char, as soon as you say that and you have those questions that you don't have answers for, the immediate emotional reaction is fear, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because we would love as human beings to have as much certainty as possible. And we just don't have that. this puts our body in a state of anxiety, and no one wants to go around and express that anxiety. So what do? You procrastinate. So you guys that are listening here, if you have employees, right, or you're leading a company, if you have people that are not taking the action, the number one cause of procrastination comes down to these things here on the left-hand side: worry, doubt, negative thinking, fear, anxiety. They're not sure what to do. They're not sure what to do. They're not going to do anything. And if you don't take action, this leads to depression. Our bodies move into a state of dis-ease, and this is the finite mindset. This is where so many of us live. Things start to fall apart, maybe not physically, but our companies become at dis-ease as well.
And don't you think that's like a cultural thing? I mean, once the executives feel dis-ease, do you not think it permeates the whole culture and community of your employees?
Well, absolutely. And I think it's a two-way street. Culture always filters down from the top, but it bubbles up from the bottom as well. Mm-hmm. And when we don't have that vulnerability to be able to openly discuss it and accept and allow things to be as they are, there's going to be some dis-ease. And it is the leader's opportunity to speak to this. And I actually want to share, I think it was Brian mentioned Simon Sinek in his book, The Infinite Game. This is a clip from a conversation that Simon had with his company about now. And so I want to listen to this, and then we'll talk about it some more. So it's about a 2.5-minute clip or so.
These are not unprecedented times. There are many cases, lists of cases, where change or something unexpected has put many companies out of business and made other companies come out stronger and reinvent themselves. The invention of the internet put many, many companies out of business. The ones who could not reinvent their companies for the internet age, but rather doubled down on the old way they did business. Every video store is out of business because of streaming, and they couldn't reinvent themselves. When Starbucks moved into neighborhoods, many, many companies went out of business. Many coffee shops went out of business, not because of Starbucks, but because they refused to change the way they did business. They still had an old ripped up couch when you had a better product. Uber is putting taxi companies out of business, not because of Uber, it's because the taxis refuse to change. This is not unprecedented. The fact that something new and this more sudden, absolutely. More shocking, absolutely. Without a doubt. But this is not unprecedented in the business world. And so for us to say, not how do we do what we're doing, but rather how will we do what we're doing in a different world? And the world is different. It's the companies that have been investing in will and having an infinite mindset for a long time that will come out of this stronger because they're prepared, and the will of the people is high to figure out a way through it. The ones that are struggling the most are the ones that spent all their money, saved nothing, appeased Wall Street, and the will of the people is low, that people are in survival mode rather than reinvention mode. It's the companies that with an infinite mindset that are in reinvention mode. It's the companies with a finite mindset that are in survival mode, regardless of how much money they have. It's the mindset. How are we going to get through this versus how are we going to change to get through this? I feel so optimistic because we're thinking about the future. We're in a dark tunnel, but there's a light over there. I don't know how far away that light is, but I can see it. But we're in darkness now, but when we come out of there, we will have a better train. A different train. We will be a completely different business. Some of us will have different jobs by the time we get out of this. And that's our opportunity. The opportunity is what will we be, not how do we to preserve what we had. That's an infinite mindset. And I'm so proud of this team because my attitude is this, not theoretically, but because I'm watching a team go through it right now. I'm watching people reinvent themselves. I'm watching people think about their jobs differently. I'm watching people think, how can I contribute in a new way? I'm watching people say, what could we be? How will we bring our message to people in a different way, in new ways? That will last forever, by the way, not just for now. We're not allowing Uber to put us out of business. We're not allowing Starbucks to put us out of business. We're not allowing the internet to put us out of business. We'll reinvent ourselves. This is not unprecedented. This has happened many, many, many times in business. This one's just a little more sudden.
And by different jobs, you don't mean different jobs out of this company, but reinvent yourself within this company.
That is the opportunity. But if you think you're going to do the same job and you're waiting, I got some bad news. That ship has sailed. And I don't mean that in a bad way. There was no reason to reinvent when we're drinking from a fire hose. But now the opportunity is magical.
That's so powerful. And I love the concerned question of the employee there. You mean different jobs within this company? And he immediately responds, that's the opportunity. Shar, what do you have to add to this?
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, I would say with the current environment right now of unrest in our company, having the infinite mindset, I think, is going to be what is going to help us sustain as an economy and sustain individual businesses. And so the opportunity our leaders have right now is, one, not only personally to have the infinite mindset, or really change your mindset, but also think about how to coach, mentor, develop, support your employees right now during this critical time. And having this mindset, it would be a tremendous difference. So I love what Simon says. It's a very powerful message.
Yeah. And I'm interested in the reactions from people. I'm going to throw this slide up here that he says it's the mindset. So it's been said that success is 95% mindset and only 5% strategy. How does that sit with everybody listening to that? Or Shar, maybe you can even voice, because I think that a lot of people feel that strategy is everything. So many organizations are out there to help someone have a better business strategy. So few, and actually I would even say that there's more people out there. There's 95% of the people are there to support strategy, and maybe 5% are there to support mindset. It's so ironic. What's your reaction to this slide?
So I personally went through this transformation in my own personal life when I decided to leave a traditional corporate job in a high-level HR and talent management position. And it is all about talent transformation and changing my mindset about, what it is. I didn't know if I was going to be an entrepreneur or a consultant or what it was. All I knew is that I needed to really change my mindset and really think of the vision and have a strategy that I could put down to follow step by step, just like a business plan, just like a business planning strategy. All big businesses have key performance initiatives, and they have outcomes, and they have measurement, and they have plans, they have strategies. It's all about having the vision, changing your mindset about either career or company or organization, and then really aligning it. So anyway, I get very passionate about this. That's my perspective.
Awesome. I love it. And Terry, I love what you said there, is that the crisis is the only time when we're really open to change. And that's because we're faced with the reality that the old way isn't working anymore. It creates an emotional impact that shifts us out of ignorance into kind of a hyper awareness, a hyper learning of how can I develop the knowledge I need to replace that ignorance to move forward. And so this is how you get to that infinite mindset. It is study and it is understanding. Cognitive understanding first and positive thought. There's a way to do this. There's a way to grow. And now everybody that's on here, and I know we're running towards the top of the hour and some people might need to leave. If you can stay, wonderful. But think about this. Right now, if opportunity is magical, there's a way to double the revenues in your business. I don't say that in a smug way. I say that with full confidence, knowing that I've worked with people who have done this in the past. There's a small business that I coach with who's doubled their business over the last 3 years, and they're continuing to grow and innovate. Why? Because they're looking for how they can, not how they can't. And when you think that way, and when you put that record on in a cyclical nature where it plays over and over, you develop the emotion of faith. Lisa, we're going to get to where those ideas to reinvent come from. Absolutely. When you have this faith, you are in a state of calm, in well-being. And when you're calm and peaceful, you are more likely to take action. And wouldn't all of you want your employees to take greater action, to come to the table with these ideas about how to reinvent yourself? As you start taking that action, you feel the momentum. It picks up speed. We're actually at ease, going faster. This is why I got so many speeding tickets as a teenager, right? Because it's easier to go faster. And this is that infinite mindset. What's your reaction to this one here, Shar?
So I'm thinking about that, and oftentimes I think some of our senior leaders and VP or whatever level of organization seem to have a positive thinking and faith and focus, but oftentimes the challenge is aligning that with the rest of our teams. So, you know, oftentimes our executives are sitting at the executive table. They're talking about, here's our direction, here's our focus, here's our new business planning strategy, here's our new marketing strategy, this is how we're going to change. But I think the miss point is that we don't cascade that through the organization and receive feedback and help all of us in the organization have an infinite mindset. What do you think about that, Todd?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I do. Is the material that I work with helps have a culture change down to the frontline worker, to get everybody engaged in that vision, to help everybody move into this reality that we need to innovate, or we're going to stagnate, or more specifically, this might be a little harsh, right? The truth is adapt or die right now. And getting people to engage in that. So what does it look like as I kind of want to blow through some of this content right here, but how do we respond? We've got to be in control of our thinking first. That's our vision. That's our goals that are aligned with that vision, and taking the right kind of action, having all of that positive mental attitude engaged, and then getting emotionally involved with that. Now, if you can accept the idea that you could double your business within the next year, your revenue, if you can start to accept that idea and get excited by it, you're going to find yourself acting in new ways, maybe even taking risks that you've never taken before. Is now a time to play it safe, or now a time to be risky? I would say now's a time to be risky and do things you've never done before. And you're going to get results from that. Now, some of them are positive and some of them are negative. Thomas Edison took 10,000 times to be able to build the light bulb, right? And success is not a one-off thing. It's a process of trial and error. But when you have those results, this is where the adaptation comes in. You look at those and you say, what worked? What didn't? How can we shift it? How can we do it better? Where do we get hung up, and how can we eliminate that? And as Sam just put in here, how do we remove that negative thinking? And then we start over with that new thinking. And here's the place, Shari, you said, how do I get this to the front line? It comes down to vision. I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan, and Simon says, do you have a vision for your company? Why do we call it a vision? Because you can see it. Do your employees really see that? Now's the time to go back to the drawing board and re-engineer a new vision.
So I recall an experience I had as a young HR manager with a grocery distribution company, and I would be sitting in the executive conference room with about 8 others. And I recall bringing up, myself and my colleagues brought up multiple innovative ideas about changing our vision of our organization. And there were times that I felt that the CEO brought out like an imaginary bazooka gun and shot down those ideas, you know? And it was interesting to me because now I'm seeing more innovative, more thought-inspiring, risk-taking leaders that are open to the honest feedback to change that vision. So do you think that's transformed in the last several years? Because I mean, that was probably 20 years ago.
Well, I will tell you that it depends, but most people are going to take it and shoot down those ideas because that's their habit. It's so much easier to go to the negative side of things and start to sabotage. There's a strategy I'm going to give you guys at the end here, if I can speed to that.
Sure.
That really
we have time. We're good.
Help you guys. Okay. So I want to give you some. So the first thing is, we've got to have the vision, and then you know what? We've got to transform it into goals, actionable goals that are executable on every level. And I don't want to get into a soapbox about this, but the SMART goals that we've been taught to do, if you look at this, what's acceptable or what's realistic or what we're aware of, what we're aware of is pretty limited already. And if we try to stick to this model, I think we end up limiting ourselves further. So this might punch some people in the gut. I think SMART goals are stupid because it's about what can we accomplish based on our current level of awareness and how we've done everything in the past. And it leaves completely blank this idea of potential that we talked about. So where does a different way of goal setting come from? I want to share my lineage of what I study. Andrew Carnegie, world's first billionaire with US Steel, he had a different philosophy of success, and it's the philosophy that I subscribe to. He was looking for someone to pass on that knowledge and found a newspaper reporter, Napoleon Hill, and asked him, would you devote your life to meeting and interviewing the world's most successful people and sharing that philosophy of success? Of course, the book Think and Grow Rich, which everybody needs to be reading if you're in business, came from that. Napoleon Hill went and met with the likes of Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. If you're not an Edison fan, you know, I'll throw Nikola Tesla up there as well as people who thought this way. The thinking was not only popularized in the book Think and Grow Rich, but Earl Nightingale. You can Google some of his recordings on YouTube and find some powerful lessons there about how to think in a different way. He passed that on to my mentor, who I work and coach with, Bob Proctor. Now, this is not about a theoretical exercise. This is not about the teaching and motivation. This has practical, real world, concrete application. Steve Jobs was a man who thought this way. What's my big vision? I want a personal computer in the home of everybody. Oprah Winfrey has just an undaunted view and vision. Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx. If you don't know her story, it's fantastic. And she's a firecracker. Or more timely, Elon Musk, right? Who had a major weekend. All of these people realized that doing the impossible is first accomplished in the minds of the dreamer. So how do we get people to dream? How do we set those goals? So let me talk about that. There's 3 types of goals, and this will redefine SMART goal setting for all of you guys in the future. There's an A-level goal. An A-level goal is what you know how to do. If you've done it in the past, you can do it again. What Simon said in that audio clip, how do we get back to business? How do we keep, get back and just stay alive? How do we keep doing what we've done in the past? That's an A-level goal. You're not going to grow there. When we realize that we don't have growth at an A level, we move to a B level goal. And this is where we can plan. And I saw the comment there, Brian, about SMART goals making sense for tactical endeavors. I think that your SMART goal really comes down to more of a plan. What can you write out? And we all want that plan, Shar, even as you said. But let me tell you this, most companies plan on a 7, 8, 10, 12, 15% margin of growth every year, year after year. Well, if you've grown by 15% like clockwork, guess what? You're not actually growing anymore. That's an A-level goal. You know how to grow that business.
Well, and I would say right now that growth might even be more focused on recovery. And it's like growth last year, we may have been growing as a multi-million-dollar business. And this year, we're just trying to make sure we pay our staff.
Right.
Absolutely. Trying to get the PPP. I'm talking like as an honest business leader. This is what we're going through.
And the truth,
our grants.
But the truth is, if you set your goals on survival and you miss the mark, what happens?
Yeah, true. I mean, survival is, we need to think broader. That's why I keep adding to our business, virtual opportunity, different types of product lines, different type of laboratories to work with. So absolutely.
Bob often says if your goal is to get out of debt, it's the worst goal ever because you're thinking about debt, so you're going to actually end up being in debt.
True.
Right? So if you're thinking about survival, the worry behind that is we're going to perish in this economy.
Right. And restaurant industry, you can imagine many businesses are going through this.
Absolutely. But if you can embrace what we call the C-type goal, absolutely the stretcher, the larger one, the fantasy, what you really, really want for your business, what that vision really is, you start thinking on a different level. You start thinking with innovation as opposed to just survival and putting bread on the table. There's some characteristics to a C-type goal that's really powerful. It's got to be larger and bigger and beyond any past results or abilities. It's got to be emotionally powerful, right? When we look at that cycle of thinking, we got to get our emotion involved. It has to be something that everybody wants, especially the executive leadership. And then they've got to be able to transfer that emotional engagement to that frontline staff. You can't know how to, go ahead, Shar.
Oh, absolutely. No, so here, I'm going to give a live example. So my company does genetic testing, but we're also about healthcare transformation. And with this epidemic that has occurred, we now have had to think about, okay, we were just doing one product of genetic testing, but now we need to think beyond and past that about, actually, there is a big need for healthcare transformation right now. There's a big need for our physicians to be paid at the time of service. There's a big need to reduce healthcare costs for frontline employees as well as employers. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying. It's a fantasy, but definitely having to think bigger than we were 3 months ago.
So everybody, I mean, you've all got a phone sitting around, right? It's a fantasy, but remember when phones used to be attached to the wall? Right?
Yeah, I had a 30-foot, telephone cord.
Were you one of the girls in high school that would get all tangled up in the cord?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And by the way, it was a mustard yellow phone.
Right? We all had those. I had one too. When phones were attached to the wall, guys, we sent people to the moon, right? Which is a fantasy. It's so hard to believe, but what you're capable of is so much greater and beyond what you're doing right now. This goes across the board for me as well. But when we start to get a little nervous when we say, I don't know how to accomplish this, or that it's risky. So we have that fear. That fear is a sign of growth. That fear is a sign that your complacency that's now obsolete has been challenged, and that's good. And it requires inspiration. So I saw a chat in there. How do we make this larger goal a reality? How do we do that? The truth is, you've got to hang your hat on something that may not be concrete, because success is a puzzle and it doesn't come with instructions. We're talking about inspiration here. And if you've never run a business on inspiration, then it might be scary. But you've got to do something to have something you've never had before. If you want something you've never had before, you must do something you've never done. So I want to teach you how to work by inspiration a little bit. I'm going to give you a real practical activity. Again, comes from some ideas in the book Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich says you've got to look at your goal. You've got to get emotionally focused on it. You got to see it in the present tense, and then start working on a definite plan. Well, I have no idea how to reach it. He says this. He says, be on the lookout for plans. They usually come as flashes of inspiration. When it does, treat it with respect and act on it immediately. Failure to do so is fatal to your success. So you want to have ideas and have them flowing and be taking action. So I'm going to show you a new way of brainstorming to get into this high vibe energy of ideas and rapid fire ideas that can transform. Call it the 333 method. And I've sent to Sam and Shar, you guys, a story called the 333 story. It'd be great for you guys to email that out to people, or if this is up on the web and hosted later, hopefully it's downloadable somewhere here and you guys can read this story. But here's the method. Grab a piece of paper, draw a couple of lines on it. From a simple T diagram. We're going to have on one side why we can't, right, double our business or triple our income right now. And then how we can. So you got to have a goal focused on it. And you as the leader running this brainstorming, you're going to draw a big, huge X through why we can't. And we're not going to go there. We're not going to allow ourselves to embrace all the reasons why we can't do something. Then we're going to shout out ideas. So if our goal is to double our revenue, how are we going to do that? Oh, I have an idea. Maybe we could do this, or maybe we could do that. Sooner or later, someone with that big bazooka is going to come up and want to blow down that idea. Well, we can't do that, Shar, because blah, blah, blah. And
well, in my company, I've experienced that half of us think that we are going to sustain in this physical environment, face-to-face environment. And the other half of us are like, wait a minute, we need to think of virtual opportunities and we need to think out of the box. And so it's an attempt of reestablishing this culture to say new ideas, innovative ideas we all can learn from this.
It is
this is how we can,
yeah.
Right?
So this is where everybody else in the brainstorming session, when the bazooka comes out to blow away the ideas, or you want to get into a cycle of negative thoughts about why it won't work, everyone else has to fire back. And so we empower everybody else to say, next, right? No, we can't do that because next, here's this idea, right? And I've been in rooms where we do this, and the ideas start to come faster and faster and faster. And it's not that the first idea is the one that's going to provide the answer and the solution to double your income. It's not the 50th, but you're never going to get to the 78th idea that might actually work for you if you get stuck on why number 3 won't work.
True.
The purpose is to have as many ideas down. And I would say try to come up with 50 innovative ideas of things that you can do in your business today to grow. And do this maybe once a week and come back to those new ideas and then just move into action with them. Try them out. And you're going to learn a better way of doing it. And now when you start executing on an idea, the first ways that you execute may not be the best ways, but as you modify and adapt, you can improve those ways. What we're doing is we're unlearning how we've done business in the past. So here's a great quote by Eric Hoffer. It says, in times of change, which we're in now, the learners inherit the earth. Well, the learned find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. And that comes down to that adapt or die. I'll close with one more quote here and then see what else you have to offer, Shar. This is Buckminster Fuller. He says this: you never change things by fighting the existing reality and trying to go back to how we've done it in the past. What you have to do is build a new model of business, a new model of succession, like you were talking about, that makes the old one obsolete. What do you have to say to close on that?
Oh, absolutely. And my thought is also, many executive leaders really need to think about the fact that right now in our times and during all this recovery, as well as some of the unrest that's happening in our country, that not only is change happening as an organization to realign our talent to the organizational changes, but the fact is that your employees need career coaching and career support during this time. And that this, looking at the slide, your current model right now in your organization might not be the right fit for some of our employees, or maybe a good fit. So instead of making the employee obsolete, why not support them with their career transformation during this time and having the infinite possibility of growth? Hi, Sam, did you want to make a comment on that?
Oh, the one thing I want to say that's really kind of timeless, and sometimes as businesses, we may get used to doing the same things that we've done that generate profit and so forth. And it's important to understand that we need to continually innovate, or we're going to fall into this trap of becoming obsolete. So it's I think that's the important thing to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard because it's different and it's new, but it is for everybody, right down to the frontline employee. But you demonstrate being open to that change and being okay with it and leading people through that by the things you say, by how you react, by how you engage with your staff, and they'll follow. People are thirsty and hungry for that servant leadership, as Brian labeled it. They'll follow.
And I think listening to this is so great, Todd. I love the whole thing, and I especially love the bit on Simon Sinek's piece on Infinite. I wonder, something that's occurring to me is with the executive teams I work with, they are like so caught up in that kind of quarterly returns mindset, and the fact that we have to have that profitability and can't sack. The why we can't is almost always comes back to that. And it occurs to me that that maybe this is really all about being tied to innovation, which I know is a big driver for a lot of companies right now. So it's not like scary to think of innovation for them because it feels like a business strategy. You know, so it's almost like a semantics game or something that you have to play with a lot of these leaders to get them to open up to the idea of possibility thinking. I just see a lot of resistance to that in the companies that I work in that are trying to innovate, but they're not going about it with what you're describing, which is where it begins, right? In here,
Well,
in the mind.
you know, Lisa, we're programmed from childhood to look at results and allow those results to dictate what that means about us, right? We look at a report card,
Yeah.
you know, our kids' report card, which just really gives a measure of where their mind was, where their engagement was several weeks ago, you know, over a period of time. But we let that label them as a, let's say, a D student, right? Or someone who's struggling, or as me, I wasn't paying attention in class all the time, right? We let that label stick. And so we look at the bank account, right? Or the quarterly statements, and we say, this is a sign of where we're headed. And sometimes there's predictors, but most of the time, the current results that we experience today, it's the result of our past thinking.
Right.
And our thinking can
Right.
always be changed. Most people aren't aware of that, and most people don't believe that.
Absolutely.
So that's so true. It's so true that I always talk about that, like managing to quarterly returns is like operating your business looking in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, and I think that it was a really important point you brought out, Todd, is ensuring that you have the right environment to foster that innovation. In those brainstorming sessions, trying to block that negativity and to ensure that everybody's voice should be heard. And part of that is brought up in ensuring that you have that culture of acceptance of so people can feel free to voice up and have safety.
And you can't just do it once and say, oh, we tried it, right?
Well, the more you do it, the better, right? That it becomes easier and easier.
Yeah, you make it a practice, and then the rules for that and the vibe of that experience is a little bit more familiar to people, and they're more comfortable. You got to do this multiple times in order to get to that 78th idea.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to say, oftentimes companies do that, but they only do that with a sliver of the organization, maybe the top 5 to 10%, or the top 300 leaders, or whatever size the organization is. So what is your thought about that? I mean, why would we not open up opportunities and forums for all of our employees at all levels?
There should be. Companies who want to embrace that infinite mindset should be allowing mastermind groups to form at all levels throughout their company, within teams. And these mastermind groups are more effective led by peers than a superior, right?
Yeah.
Peers are more likely to manage this better because they're more invested with that day-to-day work. And I go back to Simon's message saying he's looking at people in his company saying, here's a new way to do business, a new way for my role. I think now's a time for every employee to be bringing forth their ideas. And it doesn't mean you're going to execute on each one, but you're going to take serious examination of it. I have a gentleman that I'm coaching here in Utah. He's got an idea to triple his company's profits. That's really what he wants to do. He's going through my work on an individual personal development, and he wants to become more engaged in his company. And he's finding that his leaders and managers aren't really open to that feedback. So this is a complete shift of trying to get ideas from the floor up. And that's going to start with the leadership and asking for it from the top down, and then listening. You can't ask and not listen. You've got to listen and then take some action on that as well.
Yeah.
I just want to say something about that I think that what we're really talking about here is in a way redefining what power means, because what you're describing is that person that leader that won't listen to their people is often, I think, kind of boils down to like, I've ascended the ladder and I got where I got because I was the smartest person or the most ambitious or whatever. And now my job is to tell you what to do. And there is still just a huge mindset around that, that I don't have to listen to the people below me because I'm up here. I must be up here because I'm smarter and better thinker. You know, that's like, I just want to strangle that thinking.
And employees are angry about that.
Yes. Yes. It's like the best ideas come from the people who are facing your customers in most organizations. So I love those peer mentoring groups. That's awesome.
And I think the true servant leader, and I'm sure, we all could chime in on this, the true servant leader knows this great truth. The more that they learn and the more aware they become, the less they know. It's that Dunning-Kruger effect, right? So, I'm learning a whole lot. I must be a master. And then all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, I know nothing. And then gradually it starts going back up. And the phenomenon you're talking about also speaks to probably the number one challenge that most C-suite executives have is imposter syndrome. Right? Oh my gosh, what if my boss or my subordinates, heaven forbid, realize I'm not as good as they think I am, right?
Yeah.
And
nothing resonates that more is when my kids bring their math homework in and they ask me to help them. And I'm like, it's like, what did I do here?
You don't know the new math method, Sam? You're a math guy. You should know the new math method.
I use the calculator. The calculator's tried and true. It works well for me.
I'll briefly share this example. I have shared this for a long time. When you guys were kids and you'd ride your bike and you'd fall and skin your knee and you'd go cry to mom or dad and they'd hold you and put a Band-Aid on it and everything suddenly became right with the world. And you thought, oh my gosh, I can't wait till I'm an adult and I have it all figured out. And I'm going to be calm and responsive. And then when you have your children and they skin your knee, you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I have no idea. Let me just put a Band-Aid. You okay? Right? And you realize in that moment, you go, I bet you this is how my parents felt. Like, wow, they really had no idea and they just did the best that they could. There's no difference between that realization and the realization that leaders make when they get up to a certain level, if they're really, truly honest and open to mature growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that we're talking about growth and I think it's great to have. You mentioned, you put up on the screen a bunch of great leaders and innovators of the past and so forth, in the current. And I think it's super important to have those types of insight, those people that inspire us, that help us think creatively and get through the hard spots that they've all gone through and so forth. But one thing that I think is super important is that mentorship and knowledge comes from all shapes and sizes. We were talking about diversity earlier. It comes from multiple cultures and keeping an open mind. It comes from the older and the younger people. I was just on a call this morning and a young lady was helping me understand a piece of software that was just, I just couldn't get my mind around, and she made it so simple. And it's just important for us to realize that it comes from everywhere. We need to keep an open mind on this.
I think that's why we see a trend to outside consultants coming in too, because they don't have to play by those internal rules, and we're looking for those external opinions because more people are becoming aware. I don't know what I don't know.
Right. Oh, that's one thing I was also thinking, it's a little off topic, but I want to bring it up. When we're thinking about roles in the company versus roles outside the company, and traditionally when we're thinking about succession and building people up and bringing them through the organization, we have the thought of, okay, we need a person to fill this particular role and they need to do a little bit of everything and be kind of a generalist. But nowadays, what's coming more and more popular and more influential and impactful is the role of the specialist, the person that is really focused and knows something on a particular topic, this expertise. And they're often found in gig workers outside our company, and I'm really thankful for the new economy that we have today, where we can find these people and benefit from their skill set. So, yeah.
Specialized knowledge, I think it's chapter 6 in Think and Grow Rich. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
Well, this is great, guys. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I just wanted to say a few closing remarks, and then we can continue the conversation. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Brian, and my co-speakers, Sam and Lisa. Thank you so much for this great opportunity to discuss today. This is now the time more than ever to come together and share these ideas and share innovation and share ideas as far as leaders in these challenging times. So I'm really excited that we all have come together today. I just want to remind everybody that on compteam.net, COMPTEAM.net, you'll see all the prior recordings from our former HR forums and then our people strategy forums on compteam.net. You'll see that Sam is the CEO of that organization. So please jump on that. And then also please share all that you've seen today on your social media outlets. This is free. This is completely complimentary to help our leaders in our community. And then also you'll find all the tools and resources such as Todd and Brian have mentioned before. All of those are also there even from this session and our former sessions. So we will be back here again. Sam will send out the registration so that you can join us again next week, and it will be Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So any further comments, team, before we close out today?
I just wanted to recite a comment that's in the chat, which I think is actually just beautiful closing comment to what we're talking about today and what we've been talking about. Hemabati Sahu, I hope I got that sort of right, says there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen. Mm-hmm. It's a Glennon quote. And we are certainly in the middle of one of those.
What periods. A powerful comment. That's great.
I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we'll see you all next week.
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you, Brian. Be well. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.